I'm talking with Stewart Grant, and Stewart is the publisher of the Woodstock Ingersoll Echo. The premiere issue will be June 16th. Stewart, thanks very much for taking time with me today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me, Mike. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
Well, I tell you, this is pretty exciting news for Ingersoll. We haven't had a paper in a while, and this is a locally owned and locally staffed paper. The staff and yourself must be pretty excited about this.
Oh, we're super excited. We've done this before. We'll get into it, but I'm from St. Mary's and I own the St. Mary's Independent, where I kind of got my start in journalism. And it's such a rewarding profession, and that people really appreciate what we're doing, bringing notice to community events and good news stories. So super excited to get to know Ingersoll and Woodstock better and report on what's happening.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're all delighted that the paper is coming to town, and glad that Ingersoll is going to be an important part of the paper. Now, your background, you started out in the finance management business, and you were in that business for a number of years here in Canada and out of the country as well. And I wonder how this background has helped you as you've moved through your newspaper career.
Well, yeah, my background is as a chartered accountant. I worked at KPMG in London, Ontario, and then had an opportunity after that to move to Bermuda for a few years and got involved in insurance accounting. I'd say my accounting background's an asset in whatever business you go into. You've got to have certainly a passion for what you're doing, but at the same time, you've got to make sure that you understand the numbers and make sure it all adds up at the end of the day to pay your employees and cover your costs and hopefully make enough so that it's a going concern. So
yeah, that's always an important aspect for local papers today, and there are so few independent newspapers. Most of them are owned by the big groups like Metroland, and they're a shadow of their former self. You began, as you said, in your hometown of St. Mary's, and that was back in 2014. Got your whistle wetted on the St. Mary's paper, and then you added the Wilmot Tavistock Gazette in 2020, and then the Stratford Times in 2021. This is a pretty impressive track record thus far. Maybe you could talk to us about why you kept adding to your group and some of the principles in behind what you're doing.
yeah, well, it's somewhat addictive. It's so much fun to be involved in this industry, and the COVID was certainly an impact in all of this. I'd owned the St. Mary's Independent for 6 years heading into COVID. I'd gotten to know Bill Gladding a little bit in Tavistock, and after his family running the Gazette for 52 years, they were ready for retirement. They reached out to me and they said, "Hey, we love what you're doing in St. Mary's as far as keeping the community stories alive. Would you consider buying the Gazette?" And we worked out a deal in July of 2020 to buy the Tavistock Gazette. It wasn't long after that, spending a little bit of time in New Hamburg down the road, I realized there was a Metroland paper there that really wasn't doing their job as far as community news any longer. It had been all outsourced to Cambridge or wherever. And so we started up the Wilmot Post, combined that into the Wilmot Tavistock Gazette about a year later, since those communities were so close together. Spending time in Stratford, because I was going through Stratford all the time. Of course, we had them 3/4 of surrounded with St. Mary's, Tavistock, and New Hamburg. And, the Stratford Gazette was an old paper that had closed 5 years earlier, and I thought there was a void there. When we put together the Stratford paper, that was a complete startup, and I put out 8 principles that I thought really define what we're all about and what I believe for the newspaper industry. So if you don't mind, I'll just rhyme off what those 8 things are. I think it tells a lot about what we want to do here in Ingersoll and Woodstock. So number 1, everyone has a story. I got my start in my love for newspapers as a kid. I've got him in my office here, a scrapbook when I was playing soccer at age 11. Pat Payton came out and took my picture and put it in the paper. Like I was actually in the paper the first week I was born because I was the New Year's baby of St. Mary's. So, you know, everyone has a way to be in the paper. We're all doing interesting things in our unique lives, and I want to get as many people involved as possible and have them a reason to read the paper because maybe their family members in it, maybe their neighbors in it. Everyone's got a story. Number two, newspapers should be free. They should be free to enjoy. We're in this society now where so much news is accessible to us for free. It's kind of what we're used to, and it kind of is what works for everyone, because not everybody has the ability to pay for a paper. You know, we all have different financial constraints. I don't want people to go into their local store and have that decision about, well, do I want to spend $2 today on this newspaper? I want them to just pick it up and enjoy it. And for the advertisers, that's ideal. You know, the reason why we've been so successful in St. Mary's, for instance, is because everybody in town, everybody who owns a business knows that everyone reads the St. Mary's Independent. So we don't even need a salesperson in St. Mary's because they come to us and they know that that's the place where you're going to find your community news and events. You know, one thing I can't understand about the post medias and the Metrolands of the world is that they charge for their papers, but they give away all their articles for free online. So people think, well, why do I want to buy this newspaper? Because I'm already reading the articles for free. Advertisers, they see this too. So they're like, why would we buy ads in a newspaper that people don't really read because they get the articles for free online? It's just a model that doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
So that's why we're going free distribution for the Echo as well. Number three principle is good news beats bad news. We get enough bad news every day when we turn on the national news or international news or go onto Facebook and, you know, people making snarky remarks at each other. We really want to be a good news focused paper. You know, let's inspire people with, you know, the kid with the fundraiser to help out, the service clubs putting on events, new businesses starting up. We'll cover, you know, other news as well, council happenings, etc. We want to have a rounded aspect, but we definitely want to lean towards the good news aspect. Number four, newspaper should be a community effort. And, you know, coming from, again, I'm from St. Mary's, so you shouldn't see a lot of my writing in the Woodstock Ingersoll Echo. You don't want some dude from St. Mary's telling you what's happening in your hometown. That's why we've got a local editor, Hannah's from Ingersoll. We'll talk about Hannah later on, but we want to encourage people to, you know, engage with us. Everybody's at events that are of interest. You know, maybe you've gone to an event, you've snapped a great photo and you think, well, you know, others might want to enjoy this. Right now, you're used to uploading those onto Facebook and maybe a local Facebook group. Well, hey, feel free to reach out to us as well, because it really takes a community effort to make a great community newspaper. So new businesses, story ideas, reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Number five principle is newspapers document history. So we want to make sure that we do a good job of telling the story of what's happening in Ingersoll, what's happening in Woodstock and surrounding areas, so that down the road, there will be a historical record of this. You know, what I worry about in our current internet age is that, you know, there are some online newspapers out there and they do a fine job right now for what it is, but what happens when the plug eventually gets pulled on those websites? Where does all this go? It's nice to have a printed actual record that'll be kept at the museums and the archives and hopefully in some scrapbooks of families down the road.
And there are people like me who like to have the printed copy in front of them. You know, it's something over a cup of coffee and a piece of toast that you can amble through and take your time. It's a different feel.
Absolutely. And I hear that from all ages. Like your 30-year-olds, for example, all day they're looking at their screens, whether it's for, their job or just in general. So even from that age group, I hear people say, I like to hold on to a newspaper. And I think this is something that, using our Stratford paper as an example, it's something that you need to sit on your coffee table and maybe revisit a couple of times, because there's a lot of local reading in it. So it's there's a lot in there for everybody. Number 6 on our principles is newspapers strengthen communities. I really think it's important to have, a central publication that talks about, what are the events coming up? What can you get involved with? Is there a charity fundraiser coming up? What about these local people who are doing inspiring things? And, kind of, there's a lot of good community goodness that comes out of a strong local newspaper. Point number 7, just putting on my accountant hat here, advertisers, big or small, should benefit from their ads. We're a local paper. I understand as an accountant what makes sense for a business. We don't have our ad rates set in Toronto by some conglomerate and applied throughout. Our rates need to make sense for people. We have flexible plans for whatever size of business you are. We've got stuff from a full page down to the smallest ad, and we work with people. We reward people for being in the paper more often. You get discounts if you're in more than once. Rates need to make sense. And finally, number 8, which is a big one and really is kind of what drives me a lot, is newspapers should be locally owned and operated. And I know this one hits home in Ingersoll and Woodstock as well, but Ingersoll in particular, the Times was here for years, the Ingersoll Times. And then, it gets owned by a conglomerate, and then a decision is made, a couple 100 miles away to close a paper in the name of cost cutting or whatever. I get kind of emotional about it because it happened here in St. Mary's as well. The St. Mary's Journal Argus dated back 164 years. Wow. And then one day, November 27th, 2017, people I know work for that paper. They came in on a Monday, mandatory team meeting, and they learned their fate. They would not be putting out the paper that week. They were done just like that. And 164 years of history and still a strong paper it was gone. 36 or so newspapers closed that day when Metroland and Post Media decided they didn't want to compete against each other in some of these markets. So they just coldly closed newspapers. And 8 months later, they did the same thing to the Ingersoll Times when they closed that. So when that happened, I knew that it's so important to keep things local. It's so important to keep it locally owned and operated, have those, because you just don't know what the big corporations are going to do. And usually it's going to come down to dollars and cents for them. There's not the same care factor.
This is so much the case in media in general. It happens in radio when radio groups decide to reshuffle, and we know that hundreds of people lose their jobs at the stroke of a pen in some office in Vancouver or Toronto. It is a tragedy. Let's talk about the Woodstock Ingersoll Echo for a moment. And your staff is, as you mentioned, is very much a part of the community. Let's start with Hannah McLeod. Now, Hannah, as you mentioned, lives in Ingersoll, and she comes with some great experience.
Yeah. Hannah was editor of the paper in Kincardine for 3 years, as well as the paper in Lucknow. And she's moved to Ingersoll area. But yeah, she ran those papers all by herself. Basically, they were post media products. She did a great job running those papers out there, and she got in touch with us earlier this year. She was moving to the area. She knew Tavistock was just down the road, and she said, I love what you're doing. I've got a real passion, she said, for those telling those community stories. Like, it really resonated me with when I heard from her, and I met with her face to face, and I'm like, we've already got a great team here at the Gazette in Tavistock, Wilmot. Did you say you're moving to Ingersoll? Okay, why don't we just start a newspaper in Ingersoll then, Hannah? So she's because I knew there was a need here, but I never would have gone here until I knew that we had a really strong local person who was going to be at those events, taking the pictures, meeting with people. So Hannah's the reason why this is getting off the ground, and it's just going to explode from here. I think, like, one thing I found with Stratford was we put the Stratford paper out there, and then people contacted us and they said, how can we get involved? So we've had a number of columnists, people who maybe write once a month on a particular area, or maybe they've volunteered to take photos or whatever. But I'm hoping the same happens here in Ingersoll and in Woodstock. People say, hey, how can we get involved? Because we really want to hear from those people.
That's pretty exciting. Today in the newspaper business, local newspaper business in particular, your production person is so key to it. And of course, the graphic design and putting the paper together. Sarah Cairns, she comes with really tremendous skills. Tell us about Sarah.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have two strong graphic designers. Sarah's going to be on our Woodstock Ingersoll team, and she also handles the Stratford paper. But she's got such a great set of skills. Not only is she creative, not only is she super efficient, but she's proactive. She does a great job of checking out what's going on in the area, contacting businesses out there and say, hey, how can we help? Like, for instance, we're just going through the springtime season. So she looks at the calendar and says, okay, let's reach out to the garden centers on that. Let's see what we can put together for them. She does a fantastic job, and I'm amazed at both her skills and Tyler's with our other paper, as far as how they can take an idea that someone has and create a unique ad that's just right. So
that's wonderful.
People can either submit ads that are pre-designed, or she can design them for them. There's no extra charge for that, but she's great to work with.
Now, I gather we're going to be seeing a fair bit of Wendy Lamond. She is your community liaison person and will be a contributor to the paper as well. And I understand that you and Wendy go back a fair bit.
Yeah. Wendy's a dear friend. I've known her since grade 9. She's really close friends with my wife as well. In fact, she was maid of honor at our wedding, and she worked for years in customer service at Suregain, and which is agricultural base, but was ready for a change a couple of years ago, and I bought the Gazette, and she's just one of the nicest, warmest people you'll ever meet. Just she's meant to be working with people, because she's just so kind-hearted, and I think people are going to really enjoy getting to know Wendy.
That's wonderful. I was reading the Stratford paper, the PDF version, and you mentioned about people engaging with the Echo, and I was really quite astounded by all the contributors to the issue that I read. There must have been 15 or 20 contributors. Is this the sort of thing you're hoping for with the Woodstock Ingersoll Echo?
Yeah, actually, and if anybody's curious about what does this Stratford paper look like, and take a look at stratfordtimes.com. There's a super easy to read PDF on there, and it kind of shows what we're trying to do. It's a mix of news, columnists, sports, local events. I think that's a pretty good representation of where we
Mhm.
want to go here.
That's marvelous, marvelous. Now, one of the good things about the Echo, it will have a print version, and it will have the online version as well. Let's talk about that for a moment. How many copies initially will you run on June 16th, as an example?
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to print 5,000 copies to start with. You never really know how many. Like, when I started Stratford, I started with 1,000 copies, and we've just gradually been increasing. Now we're up to 7,300, and
Wow.
that's completely based on demand because we drop off the paper at grocery stores, convenience stores, coffee shops, retirement communities, community centers, and we take a close look at, okay, how many are left at the end of the month, or how quickly, in some cases we drop off at a grocery store and they're out in 3 days and we replenish it. So it's really demand based. Whereas if you deliver a paper to every house, like happens with, I think, the Oxford Review, for instance, you don't really know how many people are reading that paper. Like, and nobody knows, because not everybody's going to read a newspaper. But when you have it available at pickup locations and you can see people grabbing it, well, that's a measurable thing.
You bet.
So 5,000 is where we're going to start. I think it's going to go up from there. The first time we go around, we're going to have to talk to each one of these individual businesses, go into a convenience store for that first time and say, hey, you may not have heard of this before, but this is the new Woodstock Ingersoll Echo. We'd really appreciate it if we could leave some copies at your store for people to pick up. And, in Stratford, we have 114 different places that people pick up the paper. So
My goodness.
yeah, it's a full day dropping them off, and but it's rewarding to see the the reactions we get now that people are used to it. Like when we go out and deliver, oh, is that the new Times? We'd love to pick that up, and to see it, that pile decline over the month, over the week. It's cool. And we're definitely looking for ideas on, if you have a small business, or then you want us to drop off copies there, please reach out to us, because we're developing this distribution list right now.
Right, right. Now, in the online version, and I really like the PDF versions. I'm used to that. Over the years, I've read a number of papers that have PDF versions. And one of the things I like is that the advertising is still a part of the paper, because whatever you say, I read the ads as well, because I'm interested in, what's going on. Oh, they've got a sale over there, or oh, I didn't know they were doing that at this location. So it's part of the community news, and I think the online PDF version will serve you well. Now, you're going to be publishing on a monthly basis to begin with?
Yeah, so yeah, a couple things on that. Starting out as a monthly, it's going to take time. Like right now, probably not a lot of people have heard of us yet. So it's going to take time to build up advertising. It does cost money to print the newspaper. So we're starting out as a monthly. We'd love to go to twice a month by the end of the year if we get enough advertising support, enough sponsorship. But in the meantime, monthly's worked out really well in Stratford. I think people really appreciate the recap and look forward to events coming up that appear in there. We're probably going to come out with at least 32 pages that first issue,
Wow.
because there's so much to cover. And you talked about the PDF there, and I've seen different online versions of papers. For example, I've subscribed to the London Free Press in the past, and their online version, and some are a bit cumbersome. Some you have to zoom in, zoom out, move the screen over. I've seen other publications do like a flip book online, and it's usually kind of slow, and it's small type. our PDF, the way that scrolls up the screen is super easy to read. So we get a lot of people saying, you know what, we really enjoy the PDF. And like you say, on the local ads, studies have shown that people do enjoy those local ads. They want to know what's happening in their community, as long as those ads, relate to them, right? If they're ads from a city, miles away, maybe not as relevant, but we want to have a number of local advertisements and sponsorships in the paper. And for those advertisers, if they bought a page 1 ad or a page 3 ad, we want the readers to have that same experience and to see those advertisements when they're looking through either the PDF or the print version.
Right, right. Now, I want to talk about advertisers for the moment because I think this is so important for Ingersoll merchants who have not had the opportunity to advertise in print for quite a while. How can they get in touch with you? Because I think here we are coming up to the end of May, and soon we'll be getting closer to your first edition on the 16th. So we want advertisers to be thinking about it and to be inquiring. How do they get in touch?
Yeah, so our main email is info@theecho.ca. So easy to remember there, info@theecho.ca, or they can give Wendy a shout at 519-655-2341, or they can reach us through our Facebook page through the messenger system. But speaking of that first issue, I know how hard it is to sell ads to a newspaper that doesn't yet exist. So if you have a small business and you want to get your name out there and be part of this historic first issue, you might be really surprised at how good of a deal I can get you on that first one, because we want to show in that first issue what a mature newspaper would look like. But at the same time, we recognize that it's very hard to sell advertising to a paper that doesn't exist. So give us a call and we might get you one heck of a deal.
Excellent.
To be part of this first issue. And we just want to build relationships with this first issue.
Well, as a guy who spent most of his career in marketing and advertising, I understand the power of the media. I understand the relationships that develop between whether it be a reader or a listener to radio, to the local messages. And I think any advertiser in Ingersoll that wants to be a part of as you say, a historic occasion, they should give you a call and be a part of this and show that they want to have local news in their community. So I urge them to do that. Now, you talked about the guiding principles off the top, and I must admit, number 6 on your list is certainly key to me about newspapers strengthening communities. I think all of us here in Ingersoll, whether it's a siren we hear, or we hear some smoke, or we hear a boom go off, and we have no idea what has happened, and likely as not, we're not going to know. And so I think this strengthening communities is so important, and it will bring a strength back to Ingersoll Woodstock that's been missing for a long while. And even on the Woodstock side, it's a bit like the old show Dog River, Woodstock. But even Woodstock is really in need of a better go at getting the news. So I think what you're striving to do for both communities is truly important. And I think you're going to be surprised at the uptake. I think you're going to see there's a real passion for having a local newspaper again.
Well, I sure hope so. And I really appreciate the encouragement and the support, Mike. I really do.
Well, thanks for taking time to chat with us. I think people will be delighted to meet you. I think they'll be excited and waiting for that first edition on June 16th. And again, we just remind advertisers, go to that email, get that phone call, be a part of that first issue. And I guess we'll see you in the paper.
Yeah, exactly. We'll look forward to seeing everybody. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks for joining us today. My guest has been Stewart Grant, and Stewart is the publisher of the Woodstock Ingersoll Echo. It is coming out June 16th. Look to your corner store, your grocery store, and look for it online. It's going to be a great moment. Thank you.